I was growing up in the Soviet Union, Soviet Russia. Now looking back, it's amazing how brainwashed I was. In fact, when I realized how important movies are as a medium of brainwash. I remember there was a movie, like maybe in the mid-1980s, where a guy lives for the United States and he's treated like this is like the worst person in the world. Like I remember in this movie, like you can't do anything worse than that. So these things little by little shape you. And also like when I was, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, they would take us to movie theaters and they would show us these documentaries, which would basically portray Americans as this people without a soul that only care about money, lynch black people, and poisoned everybody with hamburgers and French fries. And of course, the hamburger story is completely true, and French fries. And so my father has two younger sisters. The youngest one lived in Moscow, and we lived in Murmansk, so it's far away. So I would come to Moscow once or twice a year to see my grandparents. And I remember, so I was born in 1973. I remember sometime in late 1970s, for some reason, my aunt disappeared and my cousins. And, you know, like a 6 or 7-year-old, you kind of don't think about it. But then at some point you ask the question, where are they? And my parents said, well, she moved to Siberia. They couldn't find a job here. They moved to Siberia and it's very far away. That's why we don't see them. And as a young mind, you're like, okay, your parents tell you this, you know, that's true. Fast forward to 1988 or 1989. The Berlin Wall already kind of broken down, like either coming down or already came down. And I just watched, like the movie I just referred to, I just watched it maybe recently, just, you know, it's still fresh in my head. And my father tells me, you know, like we told you about your aunt who lives in Siberia. I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, she's not in Siberia. She's in the United States. Like the first innate, the reaction is like, she's a traitor. Like, this is my aunt, my father's sister. Like, you know, I know her parents. Yeah. And that is the first thought that came to me. And then my father said, well, listen, she lived in 1979. What happened was, and this is a very typical story of Russian Jews at the time, you couldn't really leave Russia to go for the United States. That was an impossibility. So, but Russia would allow you to immigrate to Israel. So Russia, a lot of Russians, what they would do, they would get on the plane and luckily, there was no direct flight. Maybe there was, but I don't think there was a direct flight to Israel. But there were direct flights to a lot of European cities. So what they would do, they would fly to Vienna or Rome. This is where most immigrants went. And they would show up to American embassy and say, well, we were going to Israel, but really we want to come to the United States. And I think there was some American legislature that made it that very, very simple. This ended up in Brooklyn. And like when you watch Moscow on the Hudson, that kind of was describing her life. What was interesting about this, I just mentioned Moscow on the Hudson. I remember when I watched Moscow on the Hudson for the first time, I want you to picture this. Imagine a huge apartment building, huge, that has maybe, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of apartments. And then in the basement, it has a very large space. And what people would do, this is like 1980s, like now late 80s, they would basically take a VCR and connect maybe several TVs to it. And they would play American movies dubbed into Russian. This became our cinema. So so if you wanted to watch new American movies, if you wanted to watch Rambo, if you wanted to watch whatever, Schwarzenegger and Stallone were huge then. Or if you wanted to watch Moscow on the Hudson, that's where you would watch it because they would not show it in the movie theater. And of course, every single voice there was, you know, kind of the same person played all the parts. Didn't matter. And the quality was horrible and everything. These kind of underground movie theaters changed our perception of what America was. Now, this is very interesting. What you don't realize, most American movies are kind of shot on the coasts or Hollywood or Los Angeles, somewhere there. So like, what was my perception of America? Skyscrapers or palm trees. And then, so this is like 1991, my aunt invites us. So at this point, I'm already embraced America. Okay. And my family like is coming to America. Our trip actually was like most immigrant story has this drama. Our story has the opposite version of this because when we flew from Frankfurt to New York, I think Pan Am, there was a Pan Am flight, they oversold economy class. So we were actually, we flew first class.
I love it.
To the United States. But anyway, we arrived to Denver and I have this incredible shock. First of all, number one, we just came from Moscow because, you know, and in Moscow, it was incredibly cold. It's like insanely cold. We landed in Denver on December 3rd or 4th, whatever. And it's 70 something degrees. everybody's wearing shorts, which is a shock because, that's number one. Number two, I look around and it's just and this is kind of average, like typical America, right? Very few skyscrapers, maybe in downtown, which we don't see at first, just a lot of flat buildings. There's a lot of, 3-4 story buildings. And that was a shock too. So anyways, that's kind of my kind of coming to America story a little bit.